Welcome everyone to Kolot Nashim, Jewish music by women composers, a virtual concert and conversation. I'm Josh Jacobson, Artistic Director of the Zamir Chorale of Boston. Joining me as co-host, I'm pleased to welcome Amy Lieberman, Head of Vocal Arts and Music Director of Kol Arev, the chamber choir at Hebrew College. Former Director of Choral Activities at the New England Conservatory of Music, Amy has been a frequent guest conductor of the Zamir Chorale of Boston.
Hi Josh, it's good to be with you, even if only on a screen. I've enjoyed working with you and Zamir over the last many years, and I know we're all anxious to resume that work in person. But that said, Zamir's many digital offerings this past year have been entertaining and educational, just as always. The first installment of Kolot Nashim back in the fall of 2020 was great, and I'm happy to be part of tonight's presentation. Although I've been a musician all my life, I am pretty late to the world of Jewish music. As a young person, I somehow never put together that the singing I heard in synagogue might have anything to do with the Mozart and Beethoven I was learning to play on the piano. Our childhood memories are mostly associative. For me, the sounds of the cantor were inseparable from the threads of my Zadie's prayer shawl that I used to braid during services. It was probably only after I'd gone to music school that I began to hear the musical part of the sung prayers as music. And in our music history classes, the only Jewish sacred music that we studied was by the Italian Renaissance composer Salomone Rossi. Of course, we learned about Mahler and Schoenberg and Copland. But it wasn't until Hebrew College hired me as a conductor to develop the school's chamber chorus that I began to get to know the music of Samuel Naumburg, Paul Ben-Haim, Yosef Achron, and Lazar Weiner. And at least I knew something about the women composers Hildegard von Bingen, Clara Schumann, and Lily Boulanger, but I had never heard of Tzipora Jochsberger, Miriam Gideon, or Flori Jagoda. I hope we keep expanding our musical horizons to include more works of underrepresented composers from all over our world. I think it's important for us to keep this window open from now on. It's been closed for far too long.
Tonight we are presenting part 2 of a series of programs exploring the roles that women have played in Jewish music. Part 1 was aired in November of 2020, and can now be accessed from Zamir's website. Over the past 5 months, we've posted conversations with conductors, composers, and scholars. Tonight, we will explore music by Benji Ellen Schiller, Elena Katz-Chernin, Achinoam Nini, Naomi Shemer, and the team of Kirsten and Ken Lampl. Our program began with a setting of Psalm 150 by one of the most popular synagogue composers of our time, cantor Benji Ellen Schiller. Included in Benji's prolific output are several works commissioned by Zamir. In a few minutes we will hear one of them, Har Ninu, a setting of verses from Psalm 81, which we commissioned in memory of Zamir alumnus Rick Boyer. But first, let's watch a recent conversation that I had with cantor Schiller, who is also an alumna of the Zamir Chorale of Boston.
I first learned about Harninu, Psalm 81, when Jack Mendelssohn was commissioning composers to write a psalm for each day of the week. And I wrote, I set Harninu as a solo piece for Thursday. And the more I looked at the psalm for Thursday, the more I fell in love with those opening lines about creating a beautiful sound with harp, with all different musical instruments. Tik'u v'chodesh shofar, the culmination. B'kesei layom chagenu ki chok li Yisrael, who on this auspicious moment of the festival it is a, is a law for us. It is a right, whatever. There's something very ceremonial and, again, auspicious and beautiful about the beginning of this song. And so that sense of celebration, of kind of processing up the mountain, called to me in Harnina. So that's how it began. You then asked me to write this in memory of Rick Boyer, someone we all loved. His memory should be a blessing. Who played percussion. Nobody played percussion like Rick. And I then came back to thinking about all the instruments and the richness of the choir and the shofar and this moment in the festival. And so what I responded to was the beauty of the words, the call to bring every instrument before God on this festival. And I envisioned the piece as a ceremonial procession walking up to the temple with all the colors and the sounds and all the chaos of the community. And first we have the bell-like sounds of Harninu from all the different instruments and the choir. And as we go, then we proclaim, Ki chok li Yisrael hu, it is a law for Israel for all time. And then the music gets more sober.
And we have these wonderful contrasts of, as you call it, the sober music of Ki chok, and then those wonderful, I'm going to use your term, bell-like tones for tiku, these little sparks that come out.
Right. I was really thinking of the different instruments, and that we are all instruments with all the different colors that we bring, right? And so, and all of this seems to be leading up to me, leading up to the sound of the shofar.
So you scored it for choir and piano and trumpet and shofar. Can you talk about that?
To me, the brilliance of the trumpet sound was exactly the other color that would complement the choir, right? And to bring the brilliance of this moment and the excitement of this procession into being. That the drama of the trumpet, right? The very presence of that sound. It's related, of course, to the shofar. So it's ke'ilu, it's a shofar with actual notes. It's almost like that shofar. It's the instrument to me in my ear that proclaimed, and that's what I hear this whole psalm about, proclaiming this moment for God. So that's why I chose a shofar, trumpet, and then to lead into, of course, the beautiful shofar, which is sounding. I'm thinking of the recording that Zamir made, and that's the performance in my ear. The shofar that doesn't have any particular sound, it plays between the sounds. That raw, ancient quality that. It's almost mysterious that we get to. So the trumpet was building to that.
When Zamir celebrated its 36th anniversary in 2005, it was so appropriate to include Harninu, which was commissioned by Zamir in memory of our dear friend Rick Boyer. The piece encapsulated Rick in so many ways. The instrumentation includes percussion and shofar, and he could play both so brilliantly. For those that did not have the chance to hear Rick blow the shofar, he could make it sing. The shofar was an extension of Rick's soul, and to me, he was the best Baal Tekiyah I have ever heard. Harninu is a beautiful piece which brings both pathos and joy to the performers. The melodies lead us forward, as Benji said, as a processional. We get carried along with the music leading to the sound of the shofar and then culminating with a final crescendo that leaves us breathless.
Josh, I think it's great that you found a creative way to keep this necessary conversation going during this year of the pandemic. It's pretty remarkable that in 2021 we are still having the conversation about the presence or the relative absence of both women conductors and women composers on the rosters and programs of the world's leading musical organizations. It's clear we have to continue having this conversation, and so we will, in an effort to continue bringing to light the significant contributions of women composers and conductors. Eventually, this conversation may no longer be necessary. As Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, "When I'm sometimes asked, when will there be enough women on the Supreme Court? And I say, when there are 9, people are shocked." But there had been 9 men, and nobody's ever raised a question about that. Today, we're going to be hearing from 2 Australian composers. Elena Katz-Chernin, who lives in Sydney, is one of the country's leading composers. We'll be hearing a performance of her setting of Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd," but sung in Hebrew. Chernin composed it for the Sydney Jewish Choral Society, of which her sister is a member. This performance by Zamir is a U.S. premiere. In fact, the first time it's been performed anywhere outside Australia. But before we hear it, this is an excerpt from an interview Josh had with the composer a few months ago.
So, welcome and thank you, Elena, for giving us your time. Elena Katz-Chernin is one of Australia's most prominent and most prolific composers. She was born in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, emigrated to Australia in 1975. She has created works in nearly every genre. Among her many compositions are pieces for the Sydney and Melbourne Symphony Orchestras, the City of London Sinfonia, the Berlin Philharmonic, and the operas in Sydney, Berlin, Hanover, and Kassel, to name only a few. It is great to meet you, and thank you for giving us some time, Elena.
It is great to meet you, Josh, as well, and thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
What inspired you to turn to Jewish themes?
I guess it's really fun for me to write from where I come from, where my heart is. I feel those themes. I have written a lot of music that may not have had the subject matter Jewish, but it had Jewish undertones. There are some intervals that I've used that people say, "Oh, that sounds Jewish." I'm not aware of it. It's, I guess, part of me, just as much as Russian flavor in my music as well. It's a kind of Jewish-Russian flavor that's, I guess, embedded in me. And it's hard to say why. I was born Jewish, so I guess that's why. And it's just part of me. And I'm not consciously going for those themes, but if it happens, I'm welcoming them. In my childhood, what was encouraged was atheism. That was taught at school, and religion was not at all encouraged or even allowed. So that was not at all part of my life. My parents were not religious. I was not religious. But in Russia, I was not brought up like that. Although my grandparents spoke Yiddish. And especially when they didn't want us to understand what they were saying, they spoke Yiddish. I remember that. I said, "What is that language?"
So let's go back to the piece. You chose Psalm 23, or Psalm 23 chose you, and you set the text in Hebrew. What's the relationship of the music to the text? How did it speak to you?
It was kind of gift to my sister in a way for her choir. And so I said, yes, I will, if you help me with words, what they mean, how they pronounce, how you sing them. And if you also sit with me while I'm writing it. I actually quite like composing while somebody's right next to me. And I had few ideas before, and then we could sort of shift it and point it in the right direction when the new section came. So that's why it's kind of sectional. And there's always a switch at some point, and something goes slower, something goes faster, something is a bit more turbulent and more emotional, something less emotional. And my music is emotional.
Well, this setting certainly has a very strong pulsation to it, and a rather rapid tempo, and then goes into a faster tempo, and then back to the rapid tempo, which seems so different from most of the settings of Psalm 23 that we're familiar with, the most famous perhaps being Bernstein's setting in the second movement of his Chichester Psalms, a very slow and lyrical and pastoral setting. Yours is full of energy. Can you speak about that?
Well, I guess my music is energetic often. Sometimes people say, what do you want from your music that the audience takes away? And I always think uplifted. And that's one thing. And the other thing, I want people to be moved as well, So, and somehow the way to get there in some ways for me is through the pulse. I feel it's close to, it's your heartbeat, because it gives different meaning to the words as well. And I don't mind that. Maybe it's more hopeful, or maybe it's more anxious, I don't know. But whatever it is, I want to feel better afterwards.
Who are the main or influences on your style? Either who or what kind of music do you say has had a strong influence and one can hear?
Well, originally definitely Bach, Johann Sebastian.
Can't go wrong with that.
He was a huge influence. And every so often it just comes over me and I write something in tribute to Bach. It just follows me around. My other composer who I love is Ravel. So then, of course, I loved Rachmaninoff. I grew up with Rachmaninoff. I love Philip Glass, would you believe? And I think you can hear that in my music.
I hear a little bit of that in the opening of your Psalm 23.
Yes.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, he's an incredible composer. So that's.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to our listeners?
Well, I would just say that thank you so much for choosing my work, Psalm 23, for your choir. I know that it's incredibly complex to put this together in a virtual way. And in the times that we live now in, I really appreciate the effort and incredible work that you've already put into this work. And I'm grateful.
Hi, Judy Campbell from the Outback, Australia, where we're currently traveling in our caravan. Technology has allowed me to listen to this wonderful new recording of Elena Katz-Chernин's Psalm 23, and I think it's wonderful how the Boston Zamir Chorale has matched Elena's vitality in her composition with their performance. As always, her work is full of vitality and energy, and I love this recording, directed by Josh Jacobson, Kol HaKavod.
Also from Australia, we have the team of Kirsten and Ken Lampl. Listen to this beautiful setting of one verse from Psalm 105. Dirshu Adonai ve'uzo pakashu fanav tamid. Search for the Lord and for his strength. Seek the Lord's presence continually. Because of the pandemic, we were never able to properly perform or record this piece, but let's listen to our dress rehearsal from March of 2020. The effect is meditative, hypnotic, spiritual. Sit back, listen, and go with the flow. Okay, we are delighted to have with us today Ken Lampl, composer, American-born composer known for his film, television, and choral music. He is convener, which is the head of the Composition for Film and Video Game program at the Australian National University School of Music in Canberra. And so welcome, Ken. Great to have you across on the other side of the globe. Tell us something about your background and what attracted you to writing music that was a setting of Jewish texts and using the Hebrew language.
I mean, my first and I think most profound musical experiences were in synagogue. I belonged to synagogue Har Sinai in Trenton, New Jersey, and we were really fortunate because our cantor was a trained opera singer. And we had one of the really sort of old school synagogues that was built at the turn of the century with the beautiful stained glass. And at that time we had choir on, Saturday morning services. Often there was choir. Certainly on the high holidays, it was always choir and organ. So I just remember just sitting there and just letting my mind just wander and getting lost into the beauty of the music. And sort of midlife then sort of got interested in sort of reclaiming my roots in terms of my Jewish heritage in composition, because I'd always I hadn't written any choral music except for this choral music.
But tell us about this piece that we're hearing in this program, Dear Shu. How did you choose the text?
Yeah, I look for texts that reflect the music. The music is sort of pre-written, but we'll start writing. I'm certainly, Kirsten and I, when we were working on this, we started writing it. And then we look for texts, read the Psalms are always a great place. I find that the texts of the Psalms are wonderful, just because you can adapt them so quickly. You can just find a short, we sort of prefer one or two line text.
All right. So lately, you've been composing music with Kirsten, who at that time was your wife. What is it like to co-compose? What's the procedure? How does that work?
It's actually, quite interesting, and it's very different than people might think. There's a lot of thought that goes in before any touching of music happens. So a lot of the way that we work together is just talking about things and talking about ideas. And she's, very, very certainly in the piece, very, very influential in just bringing music to my attention that I hadn't heard. Where she really, really excels in is just knowing when and being able to point out when things aren't right, or that's not right here, or that counterpoint, that line doesn't really work there. A lot, we went through the texts. We talked a lot about what music is about. A lot of it was because she's a very, very well-read person. And so we even the very, very first time we met, she in Denmark. This is when this particular piece was written. Kirsten was still living in Denmark, and it was one of the first pieces that we worked together on.
Now, obviously, she brings a very different perspective than you do. You mentioned that she's 25 years younger. She is of a different religion, and she's a woman. And one of the things we're investigating in this project is, does a woman bring a different perspective to composition than a man? What do you think?
That's a very interesting question, because also one of the things I just want to preface all of this is she doesn't like to speak publicly about her musical life. So that's exactly why I'm speaking, and it has always been, I've always been sort of the spokesperson, because she doesn't like to talk about it, because it's a very personal thing to her. And that's exactly why why she's not at this moment talking about the music, and I am. It's just a personal preference, aesthetic preference that that she has. And it's a really interesting question about does a woman bring something different to the table? Because also being Scandinavian, they look at it differently. It's very interesting, because the gender issues that are very much of sort of primary sort of in our cultural life, in our political life, are very much part of the table, certainly in the US and very much in Australia. She just, she doesn't really see it that way, because again, in the Scandinavian countries, there's been a sort of an equality and an equity that's been in that culture. So there's not so much difference. And it's just not sort of something that's really on the radar screen for her. So for us, it's just sort of two creative people coming to the table, and making some music.
Ken, anything else about Dear Shoe?
Yeah, we just like that sort of transcendent spiritual kind of feeling that music has. But I'll give you a little anecdote about the piece. A big inspiration for the opening of the piece, which you'll appreciate, is it opens up on the chords to Appalachian Spring. So one of the things at that particular time, we were really, really interested in Copland's music, and there was just a certain bitonality that Copland has in a way that's not harsh to listen to, but a very sort of a beautiful bitonality.
Well, Ken, thank you so much for talking with us. Fascinating to hear about your composition process for both of you and the genesis of the piece. We wish you well.
Thanks for having me, Josh.
Okay. And now we are pleased to present a message from Meron Reuven, Consul General of Israel to New England.
Shalom, everybody. It's a pleasure to be joining you for the second part of Kolot Nashim, Jewish music by women composers. Thank you to the Zamir Chorale of Boston, and especially to Barbara Gaffin and Josh Jacobson for presenting this series of virtual concerts and conversations. The Consulate General of Israel to New England is proud of having supported Israeli and Jewish women's creation in collaboration with local partners like Zamir. Tonight, we celebrate this tradition by highlighting some of the finest Jewish women's voices, including two of Israel's most remarkable musical talents, Naomi Shemer, Zichrona Livracha, and Achinoam Nini, aka Noah. Growing up in a musical home with a mother who teaches music at the keyboard, I especially appreciate the magnificent legacy of Naomi Shemer and inspiring career of Noah. I hope you enjoy this next session.
Known as the First Lady of Israeli Song, Naomi Shemer was a prolific songwriter and composer. Born in 1931 on Kvutzat Kinneret, Shemer grew up overlooking the shores of the Jordan. Many of her songs recreate the landscape that was such a part of her youth and reflect her love for the scenery of Israel. Shemer composed Shirat HaAsavim in 1976, inspired by the words of the great Hasidic Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav, who described spiritual songs that arise from the land, literally from the land, from the earth, as if each and every blade of grass were singing a mystical song to God. Nachman adds, if only we could hear that holy song.
Oh Josh asked me what I was thinking about just before I sang the solo in Shirat HaAsavim. Well, of course, I was nervous and excited because that goes with the territory when you're singing a solo. But then I thought about the words that I was about to sing, how each blade of grass has its own unique voice, and how beautiful it is when all the voices come together and make a song, and how it makes your heart full. And I looked at the circle of women that I was standing in, because Josh had actually arranged us in a very intimate circle so that we were facing each other instead of the audience. And I looked at their faces, and these are my friends. These are women that I've known, some of them, for a very long time. And I thought about how each of them was a beautiful, unique blade of grass, and how we were about to join together to create something beautiful together, and that our hearts would be full. And so what I felt at that moment was embraced.
My name is Cantor Benji Ellen Schiller, and I am a proud alumna, supporter, commissioned composer, and diehard fan of the Zamir Chorale of Boston. Kolot Nashim is exactly the kind of creative, integrative, and path-setting program Zamir Chorale regularly provides for us, its audience. For 50 years, Zamir Chorale has brought us the richness and diversity of Jewish music, from the breadth of traditions spanning musical styles across time and space, in every language and expression that is Jewish music writ large. Zamir Chorale has been on the cutting edge, consistently setting the bar high for innovation, for artistry, and for spirit. As we all know, the arts are suffering this year, with no live in-person audiences, and Zamir relies on its donations to keep it afloat. These online performances are totally free and should remain that way. Won't you join me then in helping Zamir keep our music alive? Now, and for decades to come, you can make a contribution at www.zamir.org. Through their voices, our voices come to life. Through their song, our spirit soars. Thank you.
A few months ago, I had the privilege of a conversation with one of Israel's greatest songwriters and political activists, Achinoam Nini, known as Noah. In 2009, Noah wrote a song expressing her frustration with politics. She felt that there had to be another way for Israeli Arabs and Jews to empathize with one another, to feel each other's pain, to see the world through the other's eyes. She befriended and recruited an Israeli Arab actress and singer, Myra Awad, and together they recorded this song, There Must Be Another Way. It's sung in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. The singers describe There Must Be Another Way not as a song of peace, but as a simple call to respect the humanity of others. It's a protest against the dead-end cycle of mutual hate and suspicion. We are delighted to have with us today Achinoam Nini, known as Noah internationally. You have achieved an international reputation as a singer, songwriter, poet, composer, percussionist. You've released 15 albums so far. You have sung at many venues, including Carnegie Hall, the White House, the Vatican. You've collaborated with many great artists, including Stevie Wonder, Andrea Bocelli, and Sting. You're an advocate for important causes, including advocating greater empathy and initiating dialogue between Jews and Arabs in Israel. Wow. Have you ever experienced discrimination as a woman in your career?
No, I don't feel that has been, of the many challenges that I've had to face, maybe that's not one of them, except for maybe one thing that I can mention. And that is that it has always been a point of great frustration to me that people automatically assume that I am not the composer of my songs. It's a very chauvinistic attitude towards women in general. And me having Gail as my partner for 30 years, and him being really a fabulous musician, it's generally assumed that he is the one writing the music and I'm just the one performing it. But it is me. I also wrote There Must Be Another Way. I mean, I actually wrote the entire song, and then Gil and Myra translated respectively. But out of love and respect for them, I decided to split the credit and the royalties 3 ways, so that if it ever became successful, we would all enjoy it. But the truth is, it's entirely my composition.
So a related question, do you feel that as a woman you have a unique voice? Do you feel that as a woman you have an approach that is different from that of your male colleagues?
Is this a feminine thing? I don't know. And I think that maybe as a mother of 3 children, I'm extremely concerned for their future and the future of every child born to every woman and man. I think I have a huge sense of responsibility, which I definitely implant in my music and my musical activity. Is that the kind of responsibility that comes with motherhood and parenthood, or that every woman carries on her back? I think probably, the to-do list and the multitasking and all the things that this general care and concern for the future of humanity. Is that special to women? Maybe in some ways, but I'd really like to see it more as they're people that are built that way. They're wired that way. They're wired in the sense that they care, that they do have a strong sense of responsibility, that they do feel that raising their voice, for the better good, for equal rights, human rights, for freedom and humanity is important, and that we should use everything we have at our disposal in order to promote these beautiful ideas.
All right, we're going to focus now on There Must Be Another Way. It was Israel's entry into the 2009 Eurovision contest. So can you tell us something about what inspired you to write this song?
Well, I'll begin with the fact that it was a very unusual thing for me to accept representing Israel at the Eurovision Song Contest to begin with. It is not exactly my musical or artistic cup of tea, Eurovision. It's, pop bonanza, and that's not my world. When I was approached at the time, I was selected. Originally, I said, no way. And then I thought again, and I said, well, this is an enormous media platform. I mean, every outlet in the world is going to be there. So this is an opportunity to convey something deep and important and beautiful, not only another flashy pop song. I don't even know how to do anyway. And so I said, I told them, if you agree that, first of all, I write the song, I decide what the message will be. And I also wanted to invite Myra with me. If you agree to those things, then I will agree to go. And the Israeli committee did agree, and actually gave their blessing to the fact that Myra would be joining me. And she agreed, which is absolutely not trivial for her to agree to join me on this roller coaster ride. And it was very challenging. Yeah, the whole process was extremely challenging. But then I went about writing the song, and it was very important for me to write a song that was about peace without saying peace. I didn't want to write a peace song, or a kumbaya song, as my sound engineer calls it. I wanted something actually that had some minor chords in it, that had the pain of when I cry for both of us. That's the ultimate message of that song. There are 2 key sentences. My pain has no name, meaning that I don't think, and this is an important message that I want to convey, I don't think that anyone has a monopoly on pain and sorrow, even though both nations seem to think they do, and have a total disregard for the pain or the tragedy, the narrative, the history of the other nation. And the quicker we erase that disregard, that disrespect towards each other, the better off we'll be. And then the second message is there must be another way, meaning I'm not going to come with a list of solutions, even though I have some pretty good ideas about what needs to be done. But that's not the point. The point is that the road we're on now is not a good one. I mean, we cannot sentence ourselves or subject ourselves to eternal violence, war, suffering, heartbreak, burying our sons. That is not way to live. That's not a future that we want for our children. So there must be another way, and we have to find it. It is our obligation to find the other way. And so those two sentences, I went ahead and wrote the entire lyric and the music and everything. And then, as I said, Gail and Myra translated it. And this was another thing. This is the first time in Eurovision history, first of all, that Arabic was sung on stage in Eurovision, and definitely the first time that a song from Israel, that Israel was being represented with the Arab language, which for us was a huge achievement. So what we're coming to show is what can potentially happen if we do find another way and we live together. This is an example of the kind of collaboration, the kind of friendship and sharing the spotlight, sharing the music. These two voices of ours, our voices have an uncanny a way of harmonizing each other. And they fuse, they even sound like one person sometimes. Beautiful. And so we were pointing. I think that's what art can very often do. It can point in a direction and show you what your options are. Maybe you don't see them exactly, but art can illuminate that. And another beautiful thing that we were doing, even in the way we look, I look very distinctly Arabic. My family is Yemenite, which is an Arab country. So in essence, I'm an Arab Jew. I am Arabic. But Myra, her father is Palestinian, her mother is Bulgarian. She looks totally Jewish. And she has these greenish eyes, and she's fair-skinned.
How did you connect with Myra Awad?
I connected with her by chance, actually. I was looking at the year 2000. I made an album called Now. It was the year that my son was born, my first child was born. And I wanted to do, I wanted to record a version of We Can Work It Out, the Beatles' We Can Work It Out, with a little bit of Middle Eastern inflection. And I wanted to have an Arab artist as my collaborator, to make a message, to have fun. So I was looking for a singer, a songwriter, or someone to collaborate with. And Gail actually saw Myra on TV. She was at the time playing My Fair Lady in the Habima Theater, which is pretty cool. And he was very impressed with her when he heard her being interviewed. Anyway, so Gail told me, listen, I've heard this girl. She's so impressive. She's so super intelligent. And I told him, well, did you hear her sing? He goes, no, but I'm sure she's great. So, well, she had a lead role in a musical. We assumed that she could sing. And we developed quite a friendship. And then in 2009, we went to Eurovision. And we've been really close friends ever since.
Well, this has been delightful. Anything else that you'd like to say to our audience?
Well, first of all, thank you for listening, of course. And I'm very, very proud that you're singing There Must Be Another Way. And so that's something I'm going to leave you with before I go and say Toda Rabba. And I would be very, very happy to see you guys online if I can't see you in person.
Delightful. Thank you so much, Noah. Be well. Survive this difficult time we're going through. And thank you for making the world a better place in so many ways.
My pleasure and honor. I've really enjoyed speaking with you.
All right. Thank you.
עינייך אחות, כל מה שליבי מבקש אומרות, עברנו הרחוב, דרך ארוכה, דרך כל קשה, יד ביד והדמעות זולמות עכשיו כאב, ללא שם, אנחנו מחכות, רק ליום שיבוא. عيناكي بتقول رح يجي يوم وكل الخوف يزول بعيناكي إصرار إنه عنا خيار نكمل هالمسار مهما طال لأنه ما في عنوان وحيد عنوان وحيد
We hope you've enjoyed this evening's program and the diversity of expression from these 5 outstanding composers.
We wish we could have been with you in person. We hope to see you in the audience with real face-to-face music making as soon as it is safe. And until then,
Lehitraot, goodbye for now, and thanks for watching.
Et ha-Zamir, et ha-Zamir, et ha-Zamir, higia. Et ha-Zamir, et ha-Zamir, et ha-Zamir, higia, higia. Et ha-Zamir, et ha-Zamir, et ha-Zamir, higia. Et ha-Zamir, et ha-Zamir, et ha-Zamir, higia, higia. V'kol haton nishma, et ha-Zamir, Zamir, haton nishma, et ha-Zamir, Zamir, ha-Zamir, 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 higia, higia. V'kol haton nishma, et ha-Zamir, Zamir, haton nishma, et ha-Zamir, Zamir, ha-Zamir, 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 higia, higia, higia. Hashmi